Hello guys, how are you all doing today? This is James GRIFFINGFX here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to paint a tree, a digital painting of a tree. It's got quite a game art style and it's in an isometric view, but the skills that you'd learn would be just a general tutorial for how to draw a tree in any circumstance. It doesn't really matter that I've specifically gone into game art and isometric. But right before that, I wanted to mention if you're interested in like where this channel's going, because a lot of people are here strictly for graphic design, and that's not going anywhere. That's still going to be around, so don't unsubscribe. But if you are interested in what's going on with the channel, just look down in the description. I talk about my plans for the future and all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to thank everyone for 1,000 subscribers. I know it's way above that now, and I never made a 1,000 subscriber video. But I'm definitely going to be making a 2K video, and I'll probably be doing a big template for all the graphic design lovers and a big tutorial for people interested in concept art and digital painting. So leave down in the description what you want me to cover. I read every single comment and I take like advice from it, I take criticism and suggestions. So definitely tell me what you want to see. Okay, so let's get into the video. The first thing that I did was construct a background palette, and now this is literally just a gradient. So I used the gradient tool, I made it circular, I made it radial, and I just dragged it out. I went from a very light green to a slightly darker green, just to give it a little bit of atmosphere. And then using the hue and saturation, I completely changed that colour, dulled it right down so it wouldn't take away from the image. Now I chose green because what I'm going to be painting, the leaves are going to be green and the grass is going to be green, meaning it's mostly all going to be green. So if it was like a red background, for example, it's going to take away from the image and it's not going to look natural. So that's the first thing that I did. And then moving on from that, I started doing my isometric grid. Now to do this, I literally just drew a line with the brush and then duplicated it and kept going until I had 5 in a row, and then flipped that around and turned it into a complete square. I then pressed Ctrl T, made it completely diagonal and flattened it down like I have now. And it's not perfectly accurate, but it gives you enough of an idea to sort of work out what the base of the painting is going to be. So because I'm drawing a tree and there's going to be grass, I need like the ground, the earth. So that gives me a rough idea of what that's going to be. From here, I made it very, very transparent and then literally just started painting the tree. Doing the outline of the tree. So this is literally a very rough sketch of a bush. The shape ended up changing quite a bit, but it gives me an idea. I planned out a few of the roots and just generally the shape. You have to remember at this point it's quite top heavy, so you're looking down, so there's a lot of like leaves, a lot of bush at the top and not very much of the trunk actually showing. And I decided I wanted to change that even more, so I actually ended up selecting the bush and dragging it down on top of the trunk. You'll see that in a minute. But here I was just getting a rough colour scheme of the tree. This again changes quite a lot in the end. Sorry, I was scratching my arm there. I don't know if you could hear that. But yeah, I'm probably talking way too fast as well, aren't I? I just realised if any of you aren't speaking English as your first language, you might really struggle to hear me. So I'm gonna slow down. Yeah, I was just getting a rough idea. So I was painting a bit of the wood and I realised that was probably too light, so I go back over dark and I was just sort of roughly sketching out what the tree was going to look like. This is really important just to get a general idea, because a lot of people, including myself, it was one of my biggest problems, but a lot of people will go into, see that's where I dragged the bush down on top even further. They go into too much detail to start off, so they'll go straight for the leaves. And then start pasting the leaves everywhere, or go straight, like zoom right in and start going into little lines and stuff on the wood and doing little the knots on the wood. And that isn't necessary at all, because you want to start off and become very comfortable with your plan of the tree. Otherwise you're gonna get down the line and realise that nothing's adding up, the shape isn't right, and that's gonna cause you a lot of problems. So here I was like, right, the shape wasn't looking right, so I just went back over. I went over with another brush. And as you can see, if you look at my layers, I'm working all on the same layer here, because it's not important. You don't need to get caught up at this stage, just separating everything and making it all clean. I didn't do that much with this video at all, to be honest. because I prefer to work a little bit messy. If I have a problem, I'd rather just paint over it instead of locating the layer and literally deleting it or rubbing the specific part out. I'd rather just go over the top like you would when you paint for real, like on a canvas. You can't just rub stuff out, if you know what I mean. And that's all down to preference. So a lot of people will go completely differently. A lot of people would like to work on layers. So here I started doing a leaf. Now this is an idea that I took from, let me just get his channel up here, I have it here, Valera Posmitny. I'll have his link down in the description because the tree that I've painted here is actually quite similar to his tree outcome. And I don't know whether it was his original idea, but I'd like to credit him for giving me the inspiration because that's how I found it. So effectively you just draw one of the leaves, which I'm doing here. I'm cutting out the edge now to make it a little bit more crisp. You draw 3 of the leaves and then you copy and paste it all over the bush, all around the outside. Would you call it a bush? Just the puffy bit of the tree? I've got no idea what you'd call that. Puffy bit. It's pretty good. So I just started shading it like how a leaf would look, getting the rough idea, getting some of the lines in, and the shape. So I spent probably too much time doing this. It didn't matter that much because once they're all on the tree, you have to paint on top. But I sort of skipped, not skipped that stage, but I relied more on getting leaves perfect from the start. And now things like that, it all comes down to preference. Like, it doesn't matter what part you spend most of your time on as long as the outcome looks really good. So you can see some of the things I'm doing. I'm using like quite a messy brush there just to give the leaf a bit of texture. And I just keep going over. I keep going over it with different layers. So there you go, put a little bit more texture on. I ended up getting rid of that actually. Going for darker edges. And then you'll see in a moment, I copy and paste the leaves. And here I'm changing the grading of it. I'm like, right, I want it to be a little bit more of a lime colour. Less like jungle and more sort of as if the sun's hitting it, if you know what I mean. So here I'm going over the top and pasting the same leaf on top. I changed the leaf slightly. This kind of thing's all down to preference, but you've got to remember that it's going to be going around the edge of the tree, so you want all the leaves to be in a shape that can sort of tie together. I'm not making much sense of myself, but you'll see in a second as it comes together. Now here, where I'm working really messy, what I do is I put one layer above the leaf layer, and then I turn it into a clipping mask, so that everything I paint on top gets locked into the leaf, so it doesn't end up going all over my canvas. Now I use this all the time. I find it very useful because I do like to work messy, so it's just an easy way of, instead of having to go and rub everything out afterwards, it's an easy way to lock your layer to the exact bit that you want. And now here I'm putting a little bit of sort of difference in all the leaves so they don't look like they've all been copied and pasted. I've put like a sort of a green shadow underneath each one as if they are sitting on top of each other. This is important because you don't want to get a very sort of, not spammy, but you know what I mean, like very everything's similar. It's going to catch someone's eye as lacking detail, basically. So I've made my 3, I've renamed it what I want, and I'm just working on the colour here, sort of doing the vibrancy thing. And that's where I talked about the clipping mask. I then clip it so it only affects the leaves. So now you can see here, instead of going back over the first one, I break it up into another stage, just because sometimes it's nice to see the development of your work. I end up not going through with that, I end up then working on this one for the entire thing, and deleting the first one in the end, but sometimes it helps you to look back and see what the original shape was. So here, I'm literally just pasting these leaves, copy and paste, Control-C, Control-V, over and over again, around the edge. I then work further into the middle, making sure that they're then on top of the outside ones, because obviously they'd be in front of it if it was a real tree. I think I make them slightly larger as well, so here you can see I put that bit out. And this is where the painting beforehand was important, because we've already established where the light is going to be. So I've established that it's going to be very light green on the edges, and therefore the colour is hitting that exact part. So I know where the leaves need to be in front, and where they need to be behind. And now here, it looks it looks very messy. It doesn't look real at all, and that sort of threw me off at first because I remember looking at Valero's. That's the guy I told you about a minute ago, the one down in the description. I looked at him doing this, and I was thinking, right, his sort of straight away looked a lot better, but that's because he made the leaves a lot bigger and more cartoony. I tried to go for a slightly more realistic approach. I'm not saying realistic isn't better. I'm just saying a whole different style of art. So after that, I go back and do the base, get some of the fundamentals down, because it's always important to not just work on one area. If you just get caught up on the leaves, then you're going to get thrown off at how different everything else looks. And the way that I had the lighting on the bush from the start, you can see the lightest bits are in the top left. I had to keep that the whole way through. So here where I'm doing the shadows underneath, I'm obviously having it reflecting the opposite way to the light. So what I'm doing here, I can only talk for so much of it, so I've sped this up by quite a bit, but I effectively do the same painting that I did right at the start, which is the dark bits of the tree and the light bits of the tree, and then blending it together just to get a general look and feel for the lighting. I then lower the transparency, like I'm doing here, just so you can see the leaves through again, and this just brings the tree to life, because all the little leaves that we did before, every single one is exactly the same. Even though they've been rotated and stuff, there's no layering, there's no light, there's no shadows. So putting all that back in gives you an idea for what the tree is actually going to be looking like again. And this is the bit that I spent nearly all of my time doing. It's the bit that sort of I felt was the most time consuming. I don't know whether I put too much detail in. I think that could be a slight flaw. At the end I realised that there's so much detail that I can't really blur bits out, because it's like, hold on a sec, this bit you can literally see every single stroke of the leaf, so I can't just leave this bit out. I should have probably not gone into so much detail, but you want to then paint back on top, right? Because you don't want every leaf to be the same. So here I'm doing, instead of a little three-piece leaf, I'm turning it into 4 leaves all coming out of the same sort of inner bit, and then obviously that's going to then be a little bit dark around the outside. So after doing that, like that original leaf, I figure I might as well get the shadowing done first. So I use a dark green and just go round off the edge of every single leaf, right? Because off the edge of the leaf is going to be the leaf underneath, and that's going to be a little bit darker and shadowed by the one that's on top, if that makes any sense. So I'm literally just drawing in the shadows, and then slightly blurring it and lowering the opacity here, so that you can just sort of get a rough idea for what each layer of leaf's going to look like. So now it might not look like that's done very much, but to me in my head that's given me a very strong idea of where each leaf ends, whereas before they were all sort of attached to each other. Now here I'm doing the opposite, so I'm doing the light bits instead of the dark bits. So I'm going lime green on top of each leaf, and I'm using these 4 as an example for the starting point. I'm going to be going into each leaf in this same sort of effort and this same sort of detail, but this is just showing you how I did it with the first ones. So you want to go back over with the lines like you did in the first place drawing the leaves, but doing them separately obviously means that they're going to be different, and each leaf gets a bit of personality and character instead of just all being one solid leaf. So what I'm going to do here is speed this whole process up a little bit and just chip in every now and then where there's relevant information for you to watch, because this took me quite a long time. I think the whole project took me 2 hours, I believe. I could be wrong, but around that sort of time area. So I'm going to speed this process up, and then just jump in when I need to explain what I'm doing. So to go straight back in from what I just said, I looked back at what I was going to be analysing and realised that pretty much straight away after stopping I started doing something important. So here I've chosen a very light lime green, very very bright colour, and I'm just literally sketching out the leaves that are going to be sticking up and catching some of the sunlight. So you got to imagine that the sun's going to be coming from the top left corner of this screen and hitting the side of the bush. We're sort of looking at the bush from a slight angle from where the sun's going to be hitting it. So I'm just drawing the bits of the leaf that are going to be pointing right out. Even some of them I'm doing the whole leaf, I'm not just doing the top. And they're the leaves that are quite exposed to the sun. And then here you can see that I'm getting rid of some of the edges. So you very often, I find that, because I work quite messy, that I very often need to clear up my image. So I'm literally just rubbing out I think that might have been the leaves from the layer below that we used to get the general shape. So clearing it up just helps you to paint, really. It helps you to get a better idea of what's actually going on. So yeah, you'll see here I'm doing the light parts of the leaves, and then after that I do the darker bits of the leaves that are in the shadow or underneath other leaves. And that just helps because you can't put any detail into a leaf if you don't know where the light source is coming from. Okay, so what I do here is I start to reinforce the lines on the leaves, each detail, and I then go over on top and start doing the shadows again. So we've already done the shadows, but it's very important to reinforce them. So I think, because I've already mentioned, this is specifically done for game artwork. That means it has quite a strong style. That style is not always immediately recognizable because you might be looking at it thinking, right, that's a tree, but if you really question it, it's like, right, no trees are that cute, no trees are that puffy and perfect, and the lighting's never that strong. And that is what you do in a game, right? Because the game's quite small. You're looking at it on a small screen, perhaps. So the lighting isn't always going to be... no, what am I trying to say here? So you're not always going to have enough detail to make everything look perfect. So that's why games tend to exaggerate assets, and one of those assets is usually lighting. So I've literally have an extremely strong lime, like sort of color hitting the top of the tree, and then I end up making the leaves right on the bottom right side almost black. Right, they're a very, very dark green, and that might not be scientifically true. If you go outside and look at a tree now, the chances are that's not going to be what a tree looks like. It wouldn't be completely black. However, by doing that, by creating sort of two extremes, over-exaggerating the tree, your brain looks at it and it doesn't question the lighting. It gets it. It's like, right, that's a sphere. It's a not perfect, but it's a circle. We get that because we can see the light curving round. It goes from very bright to and very large leaves on this side to slightly darker, and it's that lighting that sort of stops your brain from questioning it. Because if it was all completely flat and there was no real light hitting it, and it's small, it's on a game, then it's sort of gonna catch your eye as being a little bit of an eyesore. You're gonna be like, right, where's the layering? Where's the depth? So by taking the lighting a little bit further than it perhaps would be, you're just sort of proofing your artwork to not be questioned by the viewer. Here, what you can see I went over that very quickly, but I was just doing very light lines on the edges of each bit of leaf, just to sort of reinforce that's like shadowed. That's just sort of natural skill. That's not something that I can explain to you. I'm saying skill as if I'm some sort of professional. I'm really not. But that's something that I've picked up. Is a good way of showing some depth. If something's about to go into a crevice, you make the edge of it very, very bright, just to literally do the opposite, because the inside's going to be quite dark. And you can see there right at the end that I'm making the leaves pretty much completely black on the outside, as I said, to make it just to really show that is the edge of a sphere, even though a tree probably wouldn't really do that unless it was a massive concrete tree. And let's be honest, it's probably not going to be. So here at this point, I kind of realised that I'd spent loads of time on the tree itself, on the bushy part, and hadn't really gone into the base itself, the grassy bit enough. So I went back over that, and I wasn't afraid to sort of go over everything like I was talking about. I did do this on another layer, just in case, because I was removing quite a lot of stuff. But I just went back over it, and here you can see I'm like chopping it into the bush. I was trying to clean it up and just get a better idea in my head of what this area was going to be. Now, this is something that you're probably going to get used to just the more and more you paint, but I find that it's a habit of mine. I spend too much time on one area of the artwork, so I just say it's a tree. I just do the leaves, I just do the bushy bit, and maybe spend like 20 minutes on that, and then zoom out, and I'm like, what on earth, what's the trunk doing? What's all this doing? It's all out of proportion. So here you can see what I'm doing with this pen tool is I'm just making a shadow. I'm just filling it in with black and then lowering the opacity where I think the shadow would be. So it'd be inside some of the trunks and on the top of the grass, opposite where the sun is. You always have to just constantly be. I didn't need to look at that. It's just sort of embedded in my head where the light's coming from. But if that doesn't come to you naturally, don't be afraid. Just zoom out and just think like, right, this bit here is very bright, so that's where the light's going to be. And here you can see I'm not happy with the shape of it, so I'm going back over the top. And you can't be afraid to do that. You have to learn that this is your painting. You can chip into it however you want. So it's like this leaf, it's in the wrong place. But what do I do? Because it's like the leaf's overlapping it. There's nothing underneath it, but it's alright. Just find the colour of the grass and just paint on top. It's definitely worth it to do stuff like that. A lot of people are like, right, no, I'm a little bit scared of doing that because if I go in there, then it's going to be loads of work covering it up, and I'll just leave it. But if you have the time, and it's always better to put more time in than less when you're doing something like this, just go for it. You know, if you mess up and you have to go back, then so be it. But at least you tried it, and most of the time you'll find out that it does work out anyway. So here you can see I was going quite extreme with very, very dark lines, and it's in situations like that where it's good to have it on a new layer. So I can then lower the opacity or delete it. I always do that. If I'm going to do something quite extreme, then I will do it on a new layer. I do prefer working on just one layer, but if you're doing something risky, it's not worth it. Just do it on a new layer. If it doesn't work, you can delete it. Now you can see what I did here with the little bits of grass sticking up. I only did it on the parts that were sort of going on to another colour. So you can see the bits that stick up onto the trunk and the bits that go over to the shaded area. I didn't do it all over everything, because just those little bits sort of creates the implication that that's how it's going to be on the rest of it. I then use a very messy brush. You can see the outline of the brush. It's literally like just sort of, I don't even know where I got that from. I think that's made for doing rocks, but I'm using it for grass. I think I actually fell in love with this brush whilst doing it. You can see here I was like so excited about the fact that I found this amazing brush and just went over the leaves with it and just, I don't really know, I got a bit carried away. But it's a really interesting brush because you can literally just splash on so much texture and so much detail and layering with a few clicks because of how weird the outline is. I don't know, I think I'd found that brush in the past but hadn't really found a proper use for it, so I was quite excited when I started doing this. But yeah, so I'm going back over here again, doing it dark, and I'm doing it on a new layer so that if I go too dark, if I make it a little bit messy, it's not a problem. I can delete it or make it transparent. And you can see me, I'm just reinforcing like that area here that I'm painting on now. It's a bit of a mess. It's like, what's actually going on there? Is there a leaf like turning into 4 other leaves or something? So I do like to zoom right in and sometimes redefine what's actually going on. Because when you're painting, sometimes you'll just skip over stuff. Now, if you look in the top right corner of this screen, there's a little section called the navigator where you can see the tree in absolutely tiny. This is very, very useful. It's effectively what an artist does where they put their artwork in their corner of the room. They go and stand right back and have a look at it. Because sometimes you don't actually appreciate what you're doing until you take a step back. So, like, I don't know how to explain that the best, but not just as in, oh wow, I'm doing a good job, but sometimes seeing it in small, or looking it up there in the navigator, gives you a better feel for the piece. You can sort of free your mind up a little bit. Like if you look at the navigator, it actually looks like a perfect tree already, and it just gives you a little bit of confidence. It gives you the vision. You can't get caught up on every single pixel. Now here, I started doing the tree using that same brush that I'd fallen in love with, and that caused me some problems. It started to get a very pixely 8-bit sort of look. Like if you zoom right in, you can't actually see the pixels, but because of the shape of the brush, it looks like everything's very jagged. So I ended up, I don't know whether I didn't rub it out, but I went back over it quite heavily with some new colours, some new lighting, smoothing it all off. And that's the other thing, you literally can't, if you're afraid of your own artwork and you don't want to start adding layers and shapes because you're scared you might ruin it, then you're not actually going to get anywhere. You're not going to, your art isn't going to progress, or that piece specifically isn't going to, I keep saying specifically isn't going to progress. So you see here, I'm like, right, that looks way too perfect, so I go over with quite a smudgy brush and redo the colour in. I think that the fact that the what do you call it? The trunks. Not the trunks, the roots. I keep saying trunks. The roots went into a black line and then straight into the grass. Was throwing it off, which is why I'm doing the grass here, so it's actually sticking up onto the roots. Because I don't know, if your eye sees it as like a solid line, then it starts picking on things. It sort of starts picking bits out. Like, no, that's wrong. It would be a smoother edge or something. So the grass is actually quite an easy way to hide some of that. And then here I'm just selecting the roots as a whole object and then painting over it so that I can paint as messy as I want, knowing that my paintbrush won't go off the edge because it's restricted to just that area. It's effectively like using a clipping mask, but because my layers were all over the place, I couldn't use a clipping mask. So I'm picking the colours that I want it to be and then overlaying it and overlapping it with different shading modes and lighting here. See, I'm like, right, that should be a lot darker because it's going to be under a big bush. And straight away, I think that makes it look a lot better. And then over time, I went back over bits and brightened it up because you can see it's the same thing that we did with the leaves. The brightest parts are going to be bright lime, so the brightest parts of the roots and a bit of the trunk is going to be a lot more orangey, a lot more yellow. It's going to really be hitting the light, even a bit more white in some cases. And then the same with the blacks being near where the grass comes and over on the right side. So here I'm just deleting bits of the leaves because this bit was actually bugging me ages watching this video. I was like, right, why didn't I fix that so much sooner? All that area there on the right where the leaves are sticking out and they're really dark, it's not natural in my opinion. It's the whole tree looks lopsided. So I'm glad that I do go back in and fix that. Right, so here I start drawing some little rocks, some little pebbles. Now this might seem like some small details that don't really need commentating, but in my opinion it's actually quite an important area. Because even if you're not showing this to a client, right, even if you're showing it to yourself, or doing it what I'm doing for, just for a little bit of fun, it really helps you put the image into like the grand scheme of things, put it into a bit of perspective. Because in this case I'm doing it as a forest. You might be doing it as anything, but getting an idea for the environment is really important because it's really hard to judge what a tree looks like without feeling the surroundings, right? Because if it's going to be like maybe an icy day, like snow on the floor, then the whole tree's wrong. It's too warm lit and everything. So getting the environment down, you might even want to do that as like one of the first stages, to be honest. It helps you compose the rest of the tree better. So here I start with the pen tool, going around bits of the leaves. I literally defined the lightest parts from the darkest parts. I decided what bits were going to have light. So you see the tips of those trunks and right at the top of the tree and some of the grass, that's all going to be lit, and the rest of it isn't. So I defined that from lime green to dark green. And then in the blending modes of that layer, which was on top of all the other layers, I set it to overlay mode. And then literally just blurred it off and made it very transparent so it went over the top, and that helped take the colours that I already had but really push them and exaggerated them, and that is, as I was saying earlier, that is what you would do in game art. But that takes us to the finished piece. I'd really like to hear everyone's opinion and feedback down in the comment section. Tell me what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it, what you want to see next. I read every single comment, guys, so just tell me, give me suggestions and whatnot. And if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, and as I said before, check the description if you're interested in where this channel is heading, because I've been changing my content a lot recently. But thank you all so much for watching my video, guys. I really do appreciate it. My growth recently has been absolutely amazing, and that means so much to me. So thank you so much for watching. Have a nice day, everyone, and I hope to see you in the next video. Peace.